I'd like to ask Travis Kinney to come up. He had quite a distinguished career at the Oregon DOT, and he's now moved over to the dark side, but Travis has been a prolific contributor to the partnerships. At one point, he was chair of the Western Bridge Preservation Partnership. He chaired one of our working groups, the Bridge Deck Chloride Testing Working Group, and that group produced a very nice bridge chloride deck, testing guide, which you can find on our website. He's also the chair of the local agency Bridge Preservation Outreach Group, and I believe he'll be telling you about some of the activities under that group. So Travis has just been a heavy hitter for the Bridge Preservation Partnerships, and he's always welcome at all of our meetings.
So a couple things to note from my introduction there. One, when you go to the consulting side, you assume it's the dark side, and so there's going to be a starship of some kind. That is false. I almost turned around and went right back to the DOT. And two, if you have an idea for a working group and you vocalize that idea in this room or a room with these individuals, you immediately become the chair of that working group and have to set out on that mission. We had the Bridge Deck Chloride Working Group, which is currently kind of in a sunset mode. And today I'm here to talk about the local agency outreach working group. And so before we get too far into that, I guess just real quick, can we poll the audience? You know, if you're a city bridge owner or a city owner, county, any local agencies at all? Drew, you're a consultant. Oh, that's right, you're an elected official. That's right, okay. So we have one. You know, we were at the national meeting in Florida and we were kind of looking around and saying, you know, everyone's really motivated about this preservation work, right? And our partnerships have directorships that are set up and specifically include industry, owners, FHWA, and local agencies. But it ends up being kind of an underserved population in our bridge community. So kind of as a quick overview, we'll talk about some of the things that are happening in this working group. We're trying to address this local agency kind of component of this partnership. One of the things that we're doing with that is we're having this introduction to bridge preservation training that the working group developed and has been giving over the last, over the last year. I'll give you a date, but it's probably on a slide, so I'll have it wrong. We've been surveying local agencies and trying to get some feedback on where they're at with their bridge preservation and what are their needs. And then I'll go through and highlight some successes. So just because local agencies aren't well represented in this group, it does not mean that there's not some tremendous successes at the local level in bridge preservation. Done a little work, we found them, we're trying to highlight them and share those successes to other local agencies to hopefully continue to spread that. So the local agency outreach working group, like I mentioned, you know, our goals were to increase preservation at local infrastructure assets, provide educational opportunities to local agencies, and then identify those successes and spread that forward. I also need to take a quick break. I co-chair this working group along with Greg Freeman of Quick Bond Polymers. Greg and I working together has been fantastic. He always reminds me when I forget to send out the agendas, and so I get those sent out like right the day of the meeting, and then we tag team the presentations that we do. Why do we care? Right, so the local agencies are in our bylaws. They should be included in our partnership and engaged, but they also own half the bridges in the country, right? It's a significant population. It's not half by volume or by deck area, but it is half by the number of bridges, and they're dealing with a lot of the same struggles that we are here. So not only can we engage them to help maintain their inventory, but we can learn a lot from the local agencies as well. And they struggle with a lot of the same trends that we do. Right, you have your good condition bridges are starting to taper off and your fair condition bridges are rising, and then you have this huge population of poor bridges that tend to suck up a lot of our funding. Here's our working group. Greg and I are the co-chairs of it. We have 40 plus members in it. We have DOTs, county and city engineers, FHWA attends and participates. LTAPs, we've got plugged in with a lot of the LTAPs that do some of the national training and have become a tremendous resource for us on reaching local agencies and getting feedback from local agencies at a national level. Of course, consultants are engaged in the working group and industry members. So this introduction to bridge preservation training, right? We're thinking, how do we start reaching out and interacting with these local agencies? And we thought, let's develop this introductory training. We'll make it free. It's 90 minutes in length. Since the first one, which was about a year ago, we've given 16 of these trainings to different states. So far it's generally we work with one of the, either the local LTAP or some other entity within that state to help advertise it and spread the word and get it organized. And we kind of customize the training a little bit for that state, although mostly it's being repeated. So I've given the same presentation almost 16 times now as part of this work, but it's getting good feedback. It's being well received. I get follow-up emails every now and then with some local agencies saying that they're excited, some city or county that they're going to start some maintenance and preservation programs. You do get 1.5 CEU credits for attending it, and it's on 100% virtual. And I'll just kind of gloss over some of what this training covers. It is 90 minutes in length, and it covers a lot. So we go through an asset management plan and how preservation fits in. We try and work through how you're going to identify these candidates for preservation, how you're going to develop and fund a bridge preservation program, a bridge preservation project, and then run through a program, and then we do an overview of bridge preservation activities. So in 90 minutes, it's a lot. It's that high-level gloss over of the kind of the whole gamut of bridge preservation, and then we point them to a bunch of additional resources where they can get more information. This is a couple slides from the training. FHWA has a great definition of asset management. I don't go through the whole thing on this, but it's the keys are this is strategic and systematic process of maintaining and improving your physical assets. So you got to be thinking about it. It's not reactionary. It's strategic and systematic. And then kind of towards the end there, you got, the goal is something that we can all appreciate. It's to achieve that desired state of good repair over the life cycle of the asset at a minimum practical cost, right? There's not any DOTs or counties or cities that have said, I just got too much money. I really just need to get rid of it all, right? Like we're all in that same boat of how do we spread the little funding we have and get the most bang for our buck. As part of the training we run through, the asset management plan, focus on the fact that it's a three-legged stool. You need preservation, you need rehabilitation, and you need replacements. Replacements tend to be the one that gets the focus, that worst first approach, right? If you have a lot of bridges that are in very poor condition, and even a lot of the selection processes favor bridges in poor condition, right? If you have the worst bridge in the whole state or the whole county, that's the one that usually gets the funding, right? And so that's where you put all your money to. But without the rehabilitation and without the preservation components of that stool, it falls over. You just have a failing asset management plan that can't be sustained. There's a lot of smart people out there that are working diligently on proving the value of preservation. There was that YouTube video once that was kind of done, I've got to get a reference for it once. I think I saw it at one of the partnership meetings, but basically it's like, preservation where nothing changes, right? Like that's the whole point of it. Like if you could just go ahead and preserve everything, nothing changes. You spend your entire budget and your conditions stay exactly the same, right? That's really hard to communicate that benefit. And I know that there's folks in here that are working towards that. How do I put pencil to paper and prove to you preservation? That's not me. I say we all have cars, right? We're familiar with cars. But most of us aren't mechanics and have no idea how the car works other than turning the key on and starting it. So I like the car analogy for preservation. The average person doesn't understand why changing your oil extends the life of your car, right? Can't tell you that if I change it at 3,000 miles or 6,000 miles, it extends the life of my car by this much, and then I could calculate the area under the curve and tell you exactly how much money it is. We know it's cheap, and if we don't do it, we'll end up having to rebuild our car engine, right? So people can really relate to this. They're like, oh yeah, I do change the oil in my car, maybe not on the regular basis, but I do it so I don't have an engine rebuild. That's that bridge replacement or rehab cost. Washing your car, if you don't wash your car ever, you're gonna have a bunch of paint failures and problems with it. Same thing goes for a bridge. You gotta wash it and maintain it. And so it's just kind of like this analogy that kind of holds up, rotate your tires so you don't have to replace them right away. And try and just communicate the concept of preservation in those terms and saying, you don't have to understand exactly the benefit, you just have to understand the concept of it. The TSP2 website, I hit this throughout the training where Greg and I both got excited about QR codes during the pandemic. Most people started to learn how to use them. If you hold your phone up to that on the QR code during the training, it'll take you to the tsp2.org website. I think during a lot of the regional partnership meetings, we even were starting to implement presentations so folks that were new to this partnership, they would see this website. It is one of the biggest deliverables of everything we do. Everything that happens here today and during all the previous partnership meetings gets cataloged onto this website. And what I really highlight in the training is this bridge video library. And in fact, it's completely free, right? You don't have to sign up for a partnership to get all this content. Zacta and others do a great job on recording these presentations, and they put them onto the website. It'll have a video of who's giving it. It'll have the PowerPoint on there. I think some of it has contact information, or you can at least find it within there. And it's in categories. You want to learn more about deck preservation. You click on that link, and you'll find hundreds of deck preservation presentations on there, and you can start to learn more. You can go to that next step of, I understand the benefit of preservation now, how do I start doing some of it? And so we really highlight this throughout that training. Another kind of a practical thing that we're highlighting through the training is these preservation pocket guides. If you're not familiar with the preservation pocket guides, they're both printed and mobile apps that you can get. And this was a collaboration of, I think it was the BPETG, industry, and academia, and consultants. I mean, everyone came together and said, we have these great products, but a lot of times they don't get installed right. You have one agency that says, this is the best joint I've ever seen. And the other one goes, it's awful, I'll never use that again. And it's usually not because it just works differently in different areas, it's installation. So these guides really are comprehensive, and they're to target the installation of various products. So we're highlighting these to local agencies saying, you can grab these, you can download them on your phone. They have all these different little checklists, and you can start to install these products following this very simple guidance. And likely whatever product you're using, it's going to help you with it. And they're comprehensive, right? So when you run through these pocket guides, they're going to have not just the installation guidelines, but they're going to talk about equipment and tools, limitations and restrictions, potential failure mechanisms, training, technical support. They're really fantastic. If you haven't seen them, like I said, there are both Android and Apple applications for it. And if you just Google Bridge Pocket Guides, you'll start to find them. So we have this introductory training. We've given it 16 times. We're still going to continue to give this training. If anyone out there wants to help us organize the next one, get a hold of me. We'll set it up. But we're looking for more training opportunities. We're really hoping to get some support from even some of the folks in this room here today. Some of the things that we've looked at is asset management. A lot of the locals are saying, where do I start? Right? Like even if I have 100 bridges, which one do I start doing it on? Deck preservation is a hot topic, joint repairs, others. Okay, so don't put down others, but pick a topic and send it to me. The training can be 60 minutes or 90 minutes. Generally, we don't focus on products, but we focus on technology, and we'll have a process where you can go ahead and get your training approved. But we've already made inroads, right? We've already have 16 states that have hosted this training, and we've had folks attend, and we can probably get them to attend again. And so it's a good avenue for us to do this. The educational piece is something that we're continually pursuing in this group. There's lots of other components to engaging with the local agencies, and a lot of it's funding. How are you going to pay for any of this work? And so we put together a survey and sent out a national survey through the working group, and we actually got 500 responses, which I feel like that's got to be a record for a survey.
It definitely is.
Definitely a record. All right, we're number one, most responses, right? Because nobody wants to fill out a survey. But this was one that was short, and it was targeted to local agencies, and we used our new friends with the LTAPs and the counties that are in our working group to send it out. And said, hey, look, we're trying to help you figure out how to fund this work. And we got 500 responses. And so the first question was, who does preservation of any kind? Right? 76% said yes. Right? That's a pretty good result. I mean, it could just be sweeping and cleaning, but I mean, it's still doing some work. And then we're saying, how do you fund it? And so 30% said we're getting access to some federal funds and we're working on preservation with it. 41% said they have access to some state funds, so a little bit more there. And 33% said, we're just going at our own. We're going to fund this stuff out of our own local gas taxes. We found a lot of examples of cities or counties that are just saying, we feel it's important. We feel like it's something we can start biting off and doing on our own, and they start doing it. When you kind of look at the breakdown of how the funding is being used, you have quite a few that have zero funding going towards preservation, and then you have a much larger swath of that 1 to 25% of their total program goes towards preservation. We got that 500 responses and said, we really need some better examples to show other local agencies to follow. And so we said, well, let's take all this data we have and we'll conduct follow-up interviews. We kind of were selective with it. We worked with the 4 different regional partnerships to reach out and host these additional follow-ups and ask some general questions. We wanted large agencies, small ones, and Really what we're trying to get to is what are those examples? That all boils down to successes in preservation. So I have 3 here. That doesn't mean that there's the only 3 successes that are out there, but these are 3 great ones that have achieved success at the local level through different ways. So Michigan, this was a recent one that we came across, and it's fantastic. So they have a local agency bridge program funding, preservation project prioritization, and they have streamlined the NEPA process. So they are actually funding small-scale preservation projects with their local bridge program funding, which is not particularly common. Typically, that funding, through whatever either the selection process or just the needs, goes towards replacements, right? And sometimes there's overhead that's cited as a reason that funds do not make it to preservation. The funds are absolutely available for preservation and have been so for a long time, right? The feds, and if Raj was here, would all say, yes, we want federal funds going towards preservation. But the answer is by and large, they don't go through, or at least not through this mechanism. So Michigan is an exception to that. One of the things that's even more impressive is, if you had an inventory of all good bridges, it's really easy to spend all your money on preservation. That is not the case in Michigan. They have 1,000 bridges on the local level that are either closed or in very poor condition, right? And yet they end up programming 30% of their entire bridge program budget goes to preservation. So it's not that they don't have this need of worst first, it's that they realize that if they're ever going to get out of that worst first approach and have less than 1,000 closed bridges or poor bridges, they got to start saving the ones that they can. And that's, the state did the state really, I cut the state out of this presentation, I include them in the local one, but Michigan State really led this. They started back in the late 90s and said, we're going to dedicate 30% or we're going to dedicate our funds towards preservation. We're going to track how that impacts the number of bridges falling into poor condition. And over time, they showed, hey, we can do this. So it's a $50 million annual budget, 30 state, 20 off system. So this is the mechanism that they do. So the selections are not done by the state, they're done by the locals. And they have 7 regional councils that kind of help divvy up the money for the different regions. And the goal is about 30%. It's not mandated, but that's just kind of what they've done through their educational outreach is about 30% of those funds should head towards preservation. If you have a big project one year, maybe it doesn't happen, but overall, that's how it balances. And then you have this local agency bridge advisory board where you have 6 voting members from counties and cities. And then you have 2 non-voting members from MDOT that are there just to help provide guidance. The function of this local agency advisory board is to maintain and update guidelines for these regional bridge councils, which I'll get to in just a second. They review and approve the region bridge council's 3-year plan. So each region of local agencies within Michigan have their own region bridge council that has a plan for how they're managing that inventory. And then this advisory board kind of evaluates the effectiveness of those plans. So again, I mentioned there were 7 regions, and they're in charge of actually allocating the funds, right? So picking the actual projects with the funds that have been allocated to them. And they each have 4 voting members and 1 non-voting MDOT member. These regional bridge councils, they rate and select project applications. They determine the funding split between preservation, rehab, and replacement. They oversee these 3-year plans and oversee progress is being made towards it. All of these different agencies and all these different stakeholders, they're able to have this system and framework in place that helps kind of work through all of the different applications and fund the work that needs to happen, and a component of that is preservation. I think that's really the unique piece of this. They've also done another thing, is they said, and we've heard this from a lot of local agencies, there's too much red tape that comes along with those funds, the overhead costs. And Michigan has worked hard to streamline the process for doing preservation work. They still have to comply with it, right? You don't get to ignore NEPA requirements with federal funds, but they have a programmatic agreement in place that really helps streamline it for a lot of preservation activities. If you're doing approach work within the shoulders, if you're doing deck seals or resurfacing or overlays, pin and hanger replacements or rail repairs, those are exempt activities from having to go through the full process. So the form becomes a check the box and move on, right? This is very important because otherwise it takes time and money to get through these processes. If you're doing a low cost preservation project, it doesn't make sense. So if you're getting into the bridge joints, you got to pay attention to bats. There's a bat survey that has to take place. If you're doing deck removal or other demolition, you got to pay attention to that. So they have some different guidance on what you need to be paying attention to. SHPO, they're currently working on a programmatic agreement that matches the states. The locals weren't included. So one thing I'd mention a lot of the states here is that when we get our programmatic agreements in place for environmental regulations, often we ignore the local agencies and don't include them in that process, which then they have to go through it themselves. So anyways, they're redoing that, but most of the preservation work is already included in an exemption list where deck work, crack sealing, joint repairs, painting, scour, erosion, and drainage are all exempt from having a SHPO impact. So through these things, they've really streamlined the process to do funding, to use federal funds on preservation projects. Indiana is another great success story. They've achieved success through education, right? And so the leadership at the Indiana LTAP and legislative support and then just finding champions within the individual counties, it has really been just flat out impressive on what they've been able to do. And they have challenges. They have 94 local bridge owners with 13,000 bridges, and 829 of them are over 1,000 years old. 44 is the average age, and again, 1,000, that's like the magic number, 1,000 bridges in poor condition. So there's a need for replacements, but they understand the need for preservation as well. And so this is actually a good slide to not skip over here. Sorry, I'm running short on time, so I'm going to start blowing through the last slides, but this one I'm not going to. So 40 of the 92 counties have an engineer on staff. 8 of the 92 counties have a bridge engineer, right? And so you just got to think about that from a programmatic standpoint. How are you going to maintain your inventory when you don't have an engineer on staff for half of them, and the ones that you do have an engineer on staff, they're wearing multiple hats, right? They're maintaining their drainage systems, they're maintaining their roadways, and et cetera, right? How do you take care of that? And the key to success are training. One of the things they do in Indiana is they have this county bridge conference. It's a fantastic conference. It's very popular. I got to give Pat Connor a shout out with the Indiana LTAP. You can't mention bridge preservation in Indiana without mentioning him. One of those champions of preservation has really been engaging at the local level and just making this work. They're offering hands-on training as part of this conference. They're getting out and showing road crews how to start installing this stuff. You got to remember, a lot of preservation treatments, when you're talking about the bridge deck and joints, it's not that you don't need a lot of technology to do it, and you don't need a tremendous amount of training. You just need someone to show you how to just get started. A quick hands-on training sidebar, consultants and vendors and industry members throughout this partnership have a ton of contacts with local agencies, and I think it's a good opportunity for the partnership to engage with them at those points. I know a lot of industry members offer hands-on trainings to different counties. Tim was just mentioning to me that Advanced Chemical recently trained 45 counties in Wisconsin over a 2-week period, on how to deck seal, right? Not only is that not bad for Advanced Chemical, but it's fantastic for the preservation community, right? They're doing that work that this partnership's trying to do. Indiana, they put some money behind it. So in 2016, they created this dedicated fund of $200 million. And now it doesn't say this fund has to go to preservation. What it said is if you want access to these funds, you have to have an asset management plan. And so it gave the counties a motivation of, okay, how am I going to do it? And then in 2018, they went further and they said, okay, not only does he have to have an asset management plan, but you have to define preservation within it. And so it's that carrot approach, right? You want access to these funds? That's fantastic. Show us how you're maintaining your inventory. And I think it's a fantastic idea. A local champion within Indiana, Mel Quickmiller, she's given some presentations within this partnership. She just had that attitude. She started there at Harrison County and said, I want to start doing preservation. She grabbed her bridge crew. They all asked, what are we doing? She said, we're going to go out and do stuff. We're going to fix these bridges and we're going to start sealing and repairing joints. And that's what they did. It was that local champion. You just need that one person within the county to start doing it. California is my last example, and they have this program called the Local Assistance Highway Bridge Program Bridge Investment Credit, or BIC for short. And what it says is in the write-up, it says, we think that this larger federal aid highway funds should be dedicated towards larger projects where the overhead of some of the permitting requirements can be tolerated or can be kind of absorbed within those. But we want to encourage preservation at the local level. It was developed in 2015, and what it did is it said, well, we're going to encourage you to invest your own funds in local roads and bridges. And the way that we're going to do it is whatever you invest of your own money in these rehab, repair, preservation projects, it'll count towards your federal match. And so they'll count towards the federal match, and they will receive up to 100% credit on their of that non-federal match requirement on those larger scale projects that they're going for. And so it gives them that incentive of, well, if I have to pay my match anyways, why not invest it on my own assets through preservation? So just quick conclusions. Don't lump all local agencies into one group. It is a very diverse population of bridge owners. There are local agencies that rival DOTs, and there's local agencies that have just one person that's holding up the system. But they do not like to be talked down to, and they do not like to be lumped into one group. Many local bridge owners wear a lot of hats, right? And so trying to get them motivated on bridge preservation is a challenge, right? Because they have so many other assets that they're having to deal with. There are fantastic champions out there in bridge preservation in the local communities. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for this group to engage locals at a more efficient level. And so with that, I think we'll probably hold questions and go into, but if you have an idea for training opportunities or helping us schedule that intro, let me know.
Thank you, Travis. Good job.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.